If what I am is what's in me, then I'll stay strong, that's who I'll be. And I will always be the best me that I can be. There's only one me, I admit. Have a dream, I'll follow it. It's up to me to try. Oh, I'ma keep my head up high. Keep on reaching high. Never gonna quit, I'll keep getting stronger. And nothing's gonna bring me down. Never gonna stop, gotta go. Because I know I'll keep getting stronger. And what I am is 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 and what I am is. There's nothing I can't achieve because in myself I believe in. Gonna keep our heads up high. Keep on reaching high. Never gonna quit, just keep getting stronger. Ain't nothing gonna bring us down. Never giving up, gotta go. Because I know I'll keep getting stronger. What I am is what I am is what I am is what I am is what you are is what you are is. There's nothing I can't achieve because in myself I believe in you. Gonna hold my head up high. Keep on reaching high. I'm never gonna stop. I'll keep getting stronger. Nothing's gonna bring me down. Never give it up, gotta go. Yeah, I'll keep getting stronger.
Today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know. And you are the guy who'll decide where you go. You look up and down streets, look them over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so smart street. And you may not find any that you want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's so permanent there in the wide open air. Out there things can happen, and they frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew. Just go right along and you'll start happening too. Oh, the places you go. Oh, the places you go. The places you go. You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who fly to high heights, and you won't lag behind because you have the speed. You pass the whole game and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest.
great to see all your faces this morning. We'll begin in about a minute here. We want to make sure we have everybody who's going to be able to be here at 9 on board. As you can see, there are instructions there about renaming yourself so we know which breakout session you might want to attend. I'm going to be in the housing and homelessness breakout session, so I've named myself Housing Bill McCoy. And I think we're about ready to begin. There we are. I'd like to welcome everybody to this year's legislative event. I'm Bill McCoy, Vice President of Community Services of Greater Brockton and moderator of today's program. I have to say that our title, Legislative Event, lacks some pizzazz. Reminds me of that newly named Washington NFL football team, which is called the Washington NFL football team. I'd like to think that that could come up with something a little more snazzy. It's not that I'm against the team's name change, because before it was blatantly racist, but it's just that it needs something more provocative, just like I miss our legislative breakfast. I miss the breakfast part of our title. Frankly, I miss the bacon and those wonderful little sweet rolls, but be that as it may, today's event is more significant than ever, at least as I see it, it is. Today, we're not only engaging in a dialogue over matters of serious public concern, today we're taking an active role in a process which is critical to our democracy and the ideals on which our country was founded. No small potatoes, especially in light of recent historic developments. Today, we'll be discussing how to address some of the pressing issues that affect the lives of so many in our region, lives we work every day to help and to empower. I don't think it's a stretch to say that today we continue conducting what Tocqueville called the Great American Experiment, or what Lincoln so famously spoke of in his Gettysburg Address, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We are, all of us, after all, of the people, all of us here today. And the people we serve depend on us for services provided and supported by the powers that be at many levels, and government especially. So no pressure, just setting the scene for our time together today. I want to give each of our sponsors a moment to identify themselves and their organizations, and we'll start with Nazreen Shibley. Nazreen.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning and welcome to our legislative event. As Bill said, we missed the breakfast part of it, but we are together. And I just want to briefly say who we are as a coalition. So I'm the president for this group, and it's coalition in the Brockton area. We are called Community Services of Greater Brockton. It's been a while that this group was established. It was established in 1975, so you can see how long we have been in working together in the area. This group, the purpose is to bring people together, human service professionals and organizations, and we do this by meeting monthly, the first Wednesday of each month. So you are welcome to join this group, and we discuss issues of need, of new programming, and it's a wonderful group. I love this coalition and the board members. We really work together to bring you, bring the groups together to discuss. And in addition to this legislative breakfast, we do awards event in June. And generally, the event is in person, but this year it's still going to be virtual. And you're welcome to join us. You'll send you information about the awards event and annual meeting. And just briefly, the group meets the first Wednesday from September until May. So please join us and enjoy this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazreen. And from our partner in Plymouth, Michael Bafar. Michael. Michael, you're muted.
Sorry, still waking up. Good morning. My name is Mike Biffar from the Greater Plymouth Council of Human Service Agencies, and I am co-president along with Wanda Jacobs from Neighborhood Works Housing Solutions and Kathy Baldwin of the Plymouth and Cape ARC. On behalf of our council, I'd like to welcome you to this event and thank each of you for taking the time to join us. It's been a pleasure working in partnership with Community Services of Greater Brockton and United Way partner agencies to plan this annual event, and we hope you'll enjoy the morning with us. To tell you a little bit about our council, we meet on a monthly basis, now virtually. Our missions include ensuring effective collaboration among human service agencies in the region, sharing resources with our organizations and to the public. We also participate in legislative advocacy on issues relevant to human services. Over this past year, our council has provided support and guidance to our fellow peers on how to engage the various barriers to our respective service delivery systems that COVID-19 has presented. If anybody is interested in learning more about our council, please feel free to reach out to Kathy, Wanda, or myself. We've put our contact information in the chat section of the Zoom presentation momentarily. At this time, I'd like to introduce President and CEO of United Way of Greater Plymouth, Dennis Carmen.
Thank you, Michael. I don't often have someone take the time to introduce me. That's very kind. As Michael said, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Plymouth County. We were established in 1922, so we're getting close to celebrating our 100 years of providing services to our neighbors in the community. We unite ideas, people, and resources in order to improve lives. We have about 30 funded partners, many of whom are serving on one or the other, and sometimes both of the other two of our partners here. But I'd like to say very briefly that our greatest commodity is the relationships that we've built and the collaborations that we have. So we are honored to be here with our friends from Community Services of Greater Brockton and the Greater Plymouth Council of Human Service Providers, not only just engaged in this work as this legislative event, but in a lot of work that we do in our community to help feed people, shelter people, make sure that they're getting all of the things they need to grow into healthy and productive human beings. So I'm thrilled to be here. Hope you enjoy this morning's event. Please be active, please engage in the conversations, and we're going to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. And thanks, Michael, and thanks, Nazreen. And I'd like to thank our planning committee. We've been Zooming and emailing and keeping at today's event for several weeks now, as if there were no tomorrow, which fortunately there is, and that's why we're here. We've got 6 areas of particular concern to discuss: childcare and support for working families, housing and homelessness, transportation, food insecurity, technology, telehealth, and employment. These options are all listed in the chat. In preparation for the breakout sessions that will follow after our panelist presentations, we ask that you change your name on this Zoom session, and I think many of you already have, to reflect which need you're selecting. For example, childcare first and last name if you're interested in childcare and support for working families, or food and then first and last name if you're interested in food insecurity, and so on. Today, we've asked several of our legislators and content experts to get us started by saying a brief word about these areas of need. In particular, critical budget items or legislation currently before Beacon Hill that relates to one of these areas. Each area has been assigned to a legislator or an expert who was kind enough to agree to this and address the topic. My understanding is I think we're going to ask Representative Josh Cutler to speak briefly to the area of employment. Am I correct in that, Representative Cutler?
Sure. Good morning.
There you are.
Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to see everybody virtually. I miss this event in person. Dennis playing guitar, I think, was once a highlight, and This is always a fun thing. So it's nice to see some friendly faces here back virtually. Thank you for all the time you put into. I know it takes a lot of organizing effort to put an event, probably more so even to do it virtually than it does for an in-person event. So thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to see some of my colleagues here as well from the legislature. I think I'm right next to Sue Moran on my screen, perhaps not on her screen, but so hi, Sue. And I see Kathy Lenatra, and I'm sure there's some other colleagues here as well. So I guess briefly, I'm here to talk about employment. Looking forward to, I guess we're doing a little bit of a breakout session on that, which I'm excited to talk to everyone here about and hear some of your ideas. I just briefly wanted to share some of the news that's been going on in the legislature. We're back in session, back starting up, busy times. And one of the things I was privileged to help really take a deep dive on this past term, along with some of my colleagues that are on this Zoom, is the issue of employment, particularly as it pertains to individuals with disabilities. We know that that before the pandemic, at least, that the unemployment rate was very low, economy was humming. But unfortunately, for people with disabilities, the unemployment rate was still quite high, much higher than the regular rate. And so, we wanted to take steps to try to find ways to remove some of the barriers and the hurdles that we know impact the ability of individuals with disabilities to succeed and find opportunities in the workforce. And so we formed our workability subcommittee, and actually Representative Muratori and Representative Lenatra were part of that. And I'm sure Senator Moran would have been, but she was not in office at the time. So we took a deep dive on that. And I know some of you are here on the call. I know Casey, I saw here, and I think Will from the Transportation Pilot Program in Plymouth are here, perhaps some others. Were very helpful to us throughout that process. And we learned a lot of things about what the status of employment is and workforce development for individuals with disabilities. We have a report that we actually just issued. There was a nice article in the State House News Service this week about that. And it details some of the things that, you all know. I'm preaching here to the choir, but, things like transportation, the cliff effect, benefits management. These are all significant barriers, even just architectural access issues and physically getting to an office space. These are all things that present hurdles for folks who have disabilities. And so we're working now to try to take action and put some of those ideas to action and to try to actually make some positive steps forward in the legislature, working with our business community, working with the nonprofit sector to take some of those steps. We've already seen some progress. I'll just mention a couple quick things before we turn it over. One was with paratransit. We know that getting to work is oftentimes the biggest impediment. And especially around here, we have some public transportation, but not certainly as much as in Boston. And so, there's an innovative pilot program that's been happening in Plymouth, with the TPP program. And we're working at the legislative level to try to support that sort of program, but also expand that in other areas by allowing carve-outs for individuals with disabilities when it comes to paratransit ride services, so that they can get a more attractive rate, which makes it more attractive for these kind of concierge services like TPP. So that's something we just had a nice victory, I guess, with the transportation bond bill in the legislature. We'll be continuing to talk about that. Also, we just were able to pass a new permanent commission on the status of people with disabilities that's going to take a real deep dive on this issue of employment as well. That's something that was passed in December, signed into law by Governor Baker, and we're just now ramping that up. In fact, we'll be looking for commission members who might be interested in applying for that. So please feel free to reach out if that is of interest. And so, lots of good things happening. I guess I wanted to tease some of those things, but I'd be happy to kind of talk about those in more depth and hear from all of you during the breakout session about ways that we can do more from a policymaker point of view to help, expand employment opportunities for everybody. Because we know, people who with disabilities are a real untapped talent pool. And we know from talking to some businesses that are sort of, already know the gospel, that they can really reap business benefits, not just because it's the nice thing to do or the right thing to do, but because there's really business benefits, tangible benefits to the bottom line from hiring people with disabilities who obviously aren't always being taken advantage of to their full abilities. So I'm happy to be here. I'm going to stop here and let some of my other colleagues have a chance, but I'm looking forward to hearing more from all of you and doing a little bit more deep dive. And I'm the employment guy, I guess, so I'll change my name as soon as I stop talking. So thank you, Dennis,
Representative
and I'll turn
Cutler.
it back over to you or to Bill.
Thank you very much, Representative Cutler. Next up, we have Representative Kathy Lenatra, who's agreed to speak to food insecurity, a fairly new name for an age-old issue that has only grown more pressing for so many of late. Representative Lenatra.
Good morning, everyone. Bright and early today. And Dennis is right in front of me. And I have to say, what I miss is Dennis's joke. So every breakfast, he tells a great joke that I try to repeat to my family, and I always mess it up. But so Dennis, it's good to see you and good to see my colleagues. I would be remiss if I didn't mention today is Rep. Cutler's birthday, as he's shaking his head at me. So happy birthday, Rep. Cutler. It's a big one, big one. We won't say what, but I know you hate me right now. But a pleasure to be here. I'm here to talk about food insecurity, which, you know, so many issues have been brought up to the forefront of politics since the beginning of the pandemic. And one being is food insecurity. Food insecurity has been a serious issue for many families for years. COVID has made this issue far more worse. Due to joblessness and unemployment, Massachusetts has experienced the largest relative increase of food insecure individuals in the nation. The largest increase of food insecure children has jumped 102%. Like so many issues in our society, minority communities face a far bleaker picture. In October, 1 out of every 6 white households were food insecure, while 1 out of 3 Black households and 1 out of 4 Latin households were food insecure. You know, SNAP is the largest support for food insecure individuals and households. After that, school meals are the biggest provider for food or food insecure households with children. This was made difficult by COVID and remote learning, but luckily all schools across the Commonwealth had set up free summer and school meal sites, especially here on the South Shore. They've done a fabulous job. Plymouth, I'd give a great shout out to. Food pantries do amazing work as well. I was fortunate to work with the Plymouth Coalition and Nathan Hale, the local partners. However, SNAP provides 9 meals to every 1 provided by a food pantry. It is crucial that we continue to provide the necessary funding towards SNAP. In May, the Baker administration announced $56 million food insecurity infrastructure program, which included funding for relief to food banks, funding for the Healthy Incentive Program, which works to ensure that families get the necessary fruits and vegetables they need, and funding for thousands of family food boxes. Food insecurity must continue to be adequately addressed during this pandemic, but we must create an infrastructure to deal with the issue in a post-pandemic world. That includes ensuring families have the means to ensure that they can put food on the table every day. It also means ensuring to get healthy and nutritious foods. And I'm looking forward to the breakout session with everyone, and I will pass it along to my next colleague, and great to see you all.
Thank you so much, Representative Lenatra. We have April Connolly here from Father Bill's and Mainspring, who will briefly speak to housing and homelessness. Thank you, April, for being with us and speaking to this today.
Sure thing. Thank you, Bill, and it's nice to see everyone. And great to be here this morning. It's funny, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces that I haven't seen in a very long time. Unfortunately, due to kind of everyone being remote, but it's the first time I've actually used the chat to sort of network and say hello to people, and I have to say it's pretty pleasant. So great to be here. Many of you can probably imagine the last almost year now has been pretty challenging for housing and homeless services across our region. And I can just share a few kind of highlights, and then certainly we'll facilitate more discussion in our later conversation about housing and homelessness. But our emergency shelter system for individuals in Plymouth County was strained tremendously when COVID hit. As many of you already know, the homeless system is in overflow year round, meaning that we service well over 120 people on any given night in our Brockton shelter. We have a seasonal shelter in Plymouth that operates out of church basements historically. And when COVID, the pandemic hit, we had to depopulate our shelters and create space. On average, our beds are about 3 to 4 feet apart, and mats on the floor are usually 3 feet apart or less. And it did not allow for us to continue to accommodate the demand on a nightly basis. And so we have, after a short stint occupying tents, like a MASH unit in Brockton, we have populated ourselves into a hotel in Brockton. And so we've managed through the winter, which is our most critical time, serving the homeless, to continue to accommodate the same number on a nightly basis that we have historically. That being said, Father Bill's in Mainspring has always been committed to not turning people away and to provide shelter to anyone who's in need. And this is the first year in my time at Father Bill's in Mainspring, and certainly predating me, that we've had a wait list for shelter, that we have people outside who we're not able to bring indoors. And despite trying to be very creative with ways we can bring on new space, we know that there's an unmet need that historically we haven't had to really contend with, because we've just been able to keep bringing them in. And just briefly related to housing, because there's been so much focus on addressing the capacity needs and the demands on the homeless emergency system, housing has slowed. The housing market continues to be really challenging for us to move people into housing. And we are waiting for the eviction crisis to really hit. So we know that tens of thousands of families and individuals are at risk of losing their housing imminently, and that will only create more burden on the emergency homeless system to come. So we're, kind of bracing ourselves. We would love to say that the past year is the crisis and we're kind of in recovery now, but I fear that I hate to be to start a with such a sort of gloomy lens, but I fear that the coming year is going to be absolutely more challenging for us, and we'll put demands on all of our systems, but certainly on the housing and homeless system that we'll have to contend with. So I'm looking forward to discussing that further.
Thank you, April. Thank you so much. Representative Moran, do you care to chime in for a moment here? I know we don't have too much time, but I don't want to overlook you in this area.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate it. Great to see all of your faces. It's just for those of us, since I'm still fairly new, I'm the senator for the Plymouth Barnstable area, which means I cover the other side of the bridge, the Cape side in 3 towns, as well as Plymouth and Kingston and Pembroke. I am at present on the Joint Committee for Housing, and there'll be some shake-up assignments coming in the Senate, but housing and food insecurity will continue to be a big push for our team. Monica Mullen is deeply entrenched and brings a lot of institutional history. And I do myself as well. I grew up literally, my grandparents lived in a trailer park, farmers, lost kids young. I've got a heart of knowledge that a lot of these, the cookie cutter programs don't work for everyone. And looking at the efforts that all of you put in it, it's not just about doing the job in finding housing and helping with food insecurity. That's the ground that, you've got clients on eggshells and at health risk more than anyone else in COVID, but you spend so much time trying to navigate the system. And it's my hope going forward and really just trying to, to listen to the practical issues that COVID teaches the legislature and the administration, where, the guardrails need to be shored up and where the obstacles need to be taken down. That we put, I was just in a meeting last night about communities really just taking on individually things like basic early childhood education and really having opportunities to catch those, early challenges that families deal with. And, in terms of housing, some of the communities, and Nantucket's one example, that where the community is looking at putting transfer taxes just dedicated to housing. And the governor this year with Housing Choice made some a big push to put the housing issue in the forefront. But I'm just hopeful that we will learn from this experience how dependent we are on each other, and how visible folks in need are right now. I hope that transfers to a real appreciation of the continuing need and where we really should be putting more resources. And the rising tide floats all boats, right? Imagine what collectively the entire group here can do if the sort of administrative aspects weren't such an albatross. I mean, you could literally put staff toward, meeting with clients, those sorts of practical approaches. So we're going to be putting a tremendous focus upcoming. We have had an extension in the legislative deadline. You probably are all aware because you're experts. It's February 19, and I'll be working closely with the legislative delegation that really have quickly become my friends, and we support each other, and that's one thing we all have going for us. So I'm happy to answer any questions that can be forwarded. I've got a jet for some more legislative meetings, but I appreciate the time and appreciate getting the opportunity to speak with all of you. Please, come back to me with anything you need.
Thank you, Representative Moran. I appreciate your input. And I have to apologize. Oftentimes at occasions like this, we recognize representatives and senators who are present, and I'm kind of skipping over that. So I'll be thrown under the bus for that. I apologize, but
you know what? You've got more important things on your mind, and all of us get that. That's the great thing about our delegation. We just want to have an oar in the water and work with you as experts. So thanks for that.
Very grateful for all of your attendance here. Representative Joan Machino has been asked to address technology and telehealth for us today. Representative Machino, we're glad you're with us.
Oh, good morning. It's actually really wonderful to be with you. I have never managed to get down to your breakfast, and after listening to some of my colleagues talk, I am very jealous that I haven't gotten to hear Dennis's jokes and the singing. But the pandemic does afford a few opportunities, and certainly Zoom is one of them. And I'm very glad to be with you guys here today. My aide, John Hamilton, is also on, and even though I'll bounce in a few minutes for another obligation, he's going to try and stay on for one of the breakout sessions. So be kind to him as well. So I was asked to talk just very briefly about telemedicine, telehealth. And as my colleagues have mentioned, this is the beginning of our legislative session, and so we're actually in the middle of bill filing. But the big news in healthcare actually was last session, which was that telehealth bill. I think one of the important things to pause and sort of acknowledge is that the pandemic really illuminated the vulnerabilities in our community. People like you, people like me who work in this space and deal regularly, we see it every day. But I think especially on the South Shore, it can be masked, and because so many of your organizations just quietly do your work, and do it with dignity for the people that you're helping. I think sometimes it goes unnoticed, and the pandemic really put a spotlight on that. And of course, one of the big issues was access to healthcare. And I think we would be really remiss if we did not learn the lessons from the pandemic and take them to heart and use them into the future. And one of the big bills that came out this session, is right at the end, was the telehealth bill. It's actually an act promoting a resilient healthcare system that puts patients first. And I think it's really important to use the full name. We gave it because it does focus both on comprehensive benefits to both patients, but also to the system. Of course, we did call it the telehealth bill because the signature piece of it was now the ability to provide healthcare services through telephonic means, whether it be phone or videos like this. And that really created a lot of great access. And I think people saw that they did it out of desperation, but I think we've seen that it has tremendous benefits for healthcare of just regular people. I'm close to the Manic Community Health Centers because we have one here in Hull, and then of course the other 5. And so they've spent a lot of time talking to me about how there's no substitute for that in-person visit, but that ability to have access to a trusted healthcare provider during the pandemic. Because while we were all focused on infection rates and transmission and providing those healthcare, we still had to be taking care of the healthcare of people. And they've spent a lot of time talking to me about how moving forward past the pandemic, this will continue to supplement a lot of the services and really to be able to that continuity of services over time. And they've highlighted for me, particularly in the mental health and behavioral health areas. So that was very exciting. Also equally important, this bill actually supported our small community hospitals and our community healthcare centers. These are the hospitals and the centers that are, have most of them have mass health patients. And so their rates are lower and their portfolio is less diverse. And so we actually made payments directly to those hospitals and to those healthcare providers to buoy them through the pandemic. And I think that was probably one of the single most important things we could have done. There's a lot in this bill. It's very much worth taking a look at. It eliminates, it provides notice and trying to eliminate surprise billing. They're going to be taking a deep dive on that, and hopefully we'll have some recommendations for us this fall. It also provides access for mass health patients to urgent care. Previously, you had to get a referral. Now you can just go straight. So those are some of the examples of the kinds of access that they're creating. And of course, the other big one was that it instructed insurance companies, including Mass Health, to cover COVID care. So I don't want to take up too much time going through a bill that you all can read for yourselves. I think from my part, the important thing was this was really the first sort of obvious place where we saw an immediate response to the pandemic, where we really had the opportunity to see both what we needed to do to be immediately responsive, but to see where the opportunities, the things that beg for positive policy changes. And I think it's going to be an important place to sort of transform some of our healthcare service delivery. And I think that that's important for, a whole host of people in our society. So I'm gonna pause there. I'm gonna hang with you for a little bit longer, and then I do have to leave and excuse myself for something else. But it's just so nice to see all your faces and to be reconnected. And of course, our office is there for you. Just to reach out. And we look forward to working with my other colleagues on the phone with you on your legislative agenda in the coming session.
Thank you, Representative Machino. I appreciate your being here. And I know you all have tight schedules, and we're very grateful for all of you who have been here. One last word from Representative Cutler, the birthday boy, who has agreed to speak to us for a moment on transportation. Representative Cutler, back on.
Okay. Hello again. Oh, sorry. Sure. Well, transportation. And by the way, I just wanted to acknowledge we had a number of our colleagues here. I wanted to make sure we appreciate their time joining us. I know I saw Representative Claire Cronin, Senator. I saw one of my Senate colleagues. I'm having trouble now. Senator John Keenan. Hi, John. And I don't know if there's anyone else there. Please send me a little ping. But I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. I'll just very briefly touch on transportation, then we can turn it back. But touched on this before. We know, transportation is a huge issue for anybody getting to work. You can't have employment without transportation. And so here, we were fortunate in Plymouth County. We do have GATRA, we do have some other services, but obviously we don't have all the robust public transportation that we have in Boston. And we're kind of in the middle of before the pandemic hit in the legislature, we were very much focused on the issue of transportation and looking at revenue streams for transportation and how can we find revenue streams to help fund the infrastructure that we know that we need, both in terms of public transportation and also the expressway and trying to reduce gridlock. I know for folks that's probably the only nice thing about this pandemic has been not having to have the terrible commute to the city if that's where you work or wherever you may be going. So that remains an issue, and we know that eventually that's going to come back. And for those people who may be commuting to Boston now, you'll probably attest it's still not that great. You might think you could coast in, but generally speaking, it still seems to be bad. So obviously transportation is a big focus. I know we have a great program here in Plymouth County. I already mentioned it. I'll just give a shout out again to the TPP program that they've done, cobbling together a coalition of nonprofit groups like yourselves and partnered up with Lyft to create a paratransit ride services, which has been fantastic to see. I think there's probably about 2 or 3 of these pilot programs in the state, and Plymouth is one of them. So that's really kudos to all of you guys that are involved with that. I see now Will Shane on my screen. He popped up, and I know Casey Siemens is here. And I'm trying to thumb through and see everyone. I apologize to anyone I missed. But so that's really terrific. And that's the kind of innovative public-private partnership that we want to be doing and encouraging more of in government. And we're trying to actively take what the lessons that you guys have taught us at the state level and spread that sort of wealth, the gospel, whatever you want to call it, to other parts of the state where we think that could really be replicated. And so again, we're trying to focus on, me personally trying to focus on the aspect of how it impacts and helps people with disabilities, but transit and transportation affects everybody. And so that's really great to see. So that's a great example of this kind of communication and dialogue that you guys are hosting, bringing together people who are coming up with these ideas and really making a real tangible difference in the area of transportation for people here in Plymouth County. So I just wanted to highlight that. But I don't want to monopolize. I want to save a lot of time for some great breakouts. So I'll stop with that little tease there. How about that?
Thank you, Representative Cutler. That was great. I appreciate your flexibility here. Many thanks to all our panelists this morning and all our honored guests. And again, I apologize for not naming each of our legislators here today. Appreciate your public service on our behalf and on behalf of your constituents. We're now going to take a moment to view the slide presentation. It's not long, it's only about 4 minutes. Leslie Dunn put this together, did a magnificent job of putting it together. It features many of our human service organizations and illustrates the scope and the depth of the resources in our region. So, and please don't forget to change your name so we know which breakout room you're going to. Again, I'm Bill McCoy. I'm going to the housing and homelessness session, so I put housing Bill McCoy as my name. Please remember to do that. And Leslie, let's see that slideshow, please.
If what I am is what's in me, then I'll stay strong, that's who I'll be. And I will always be the best me that I can be. There's only one me, I admit. Have a dream, I'll follow it. It's up to me to try. Oh, I'ma keep my head up high. Keep on reaching high. Never gonna quit, I'll keep getting stronger. And nothing's gonna bring me down. Never gonna stop, gotta go. Because I know I'll keep getting stronger. And what I am is thoughtful. And what I am is musical. And what I am is smart. And what I am is and what I am is and what I am is special. There's nothing I can't achieve because in myself I believe in those. Gonna keep our heads up high. Keep on reaching high. Never gonna quit, just keep getting stronger. And nothing's gonna bring us down. Never giving up, gotta go. Because I know I'll keep getting stronger. What I am is what I am is what I am is Nothing I can't achieve because of myself. I've been leaving doors. Gonna hold my head up high. Keep on reaching high. I'm never gonna stop. I'll keep getting stronger. Nothing's gonna bring me down. Never give it up, gotta go. Yeah, I'll keep getting stronger.
Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places. You're on and away. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know. You are the guy who'll decide where you go. You look up and down streets, look them over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. And with your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so smart street. And you may not find any that you want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's open there in the wide open air. Out there things can happen, and they frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew. Just go right along and you'll start happening too. Oh, the places you go. Oh, the places you go. The places you go. You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who fly to high heights, and you won't lag behind because you have the speed. You pass the whole game and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest.
Again, thank you, Leslie, for that presentation. That was excellent. That can be viewed again, by the way, and certainly added to for future reference.
Bill, can I just, I have to just add one footnote. I apologize. By the way, that was, Dennis's singing is much improved. So that was really good. But I did want to note, I omitted to mention, we have also our good friends, Representative Allison Sullivan, Senator Mike Brady, and Representative Carol Doherty all here as well. So I want to apologize for them for not giving them a shout out. And hopefully I didn't miss anyone else.
Thank you, Representative Cutler. I was just about to mention Representative Sullivan, and I know there are others, Senator Brady and others who I've overlooked, but in the interest of time, we're going to forge on here. Again, thank you for changing your name so Kim Scotland can make sure you go to the right chat room, rather to the right breakout session. And if you wind up for some reason in the wrong breakout session, as if by magic or some sci-fi portal, we'll get you to the right one eventually. Thanks again to Kim Scotland. She's doing a great job at making sure we all get where we belong. So now it's time to go to our breakout sessions. I'd like to welcome everybody back, everybody who has come back. I trust you'll all be back with us soon. I hope we didn't lose anybody in cyberspace, but I think Kim has managed this so well, we don't need to worry about that. And so now I'm going to ask each breakout session facilitator to report on the discussion that took place during their session. And first up, we'll hear from Kathy Baldwin, who was in the breakout session for childcare and support for family, for working families. Kathy, are you ready to speak?
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
So thank you all so much. I had a really great group with us today talking about what it is that their organizations are doing in regards to childcare and supporting their working families. A lot of the challenges that I heard throughout the theme of people sharing information was the mental health piece as it relates to children, and supporting families around that in light of COVID and the shift of everything going virtual. So that is something that resonated throughout everybody's what they were sharing. Also, the challenges of helping families that are working from home around the technology piece, children that are currently in school at home, but then also having to navigate the challenges of technology. I trying to see if there's any other special needs, children that have special needs, and being able to adjust the current settings and assisting families to be able to navigate that within their own homes has also been a challenge. There are so many wonderful things that organizations that were in our group shared about that they are currently doing to address some of those challenges. So just to kind of list off what some of those things include, getting really creative about how we share resources with one another, forums such as this, and other groups that people are part of, being able to share different resources that are available for families and doing that in a continuous manner has been really successful for people. Monica Lombardo actually mentioned from her organization, they're starting to provide behavioral management training because that's obviously a necessity in being able to support families and the children that they support through their organization. Getting creative around providing fidget seats and things like that to our students. Adapting programs to be able to meet whatever the needs are for their families and getting really creative around that. A number of organizations mentioned different Zoom support groups that they're offering. One in particular around self-care, which we all kind of volunteered, we would love to be part of. Finding different ways to support families. Parent cafes was mentioned by Joni in our group. And really getting creative around partnerships. Like I mentioned earlier, sharing the resources, but really relying on our community partners because there's so much wonderful work that's going on in the community. And it's not just around childcare. Supporting families is so all encompassing. It has gone into different realms that we would have never imagined now that the COVID overlay now exists. So relying on partners and people that we wouldn't normally work with and reaching out those different branches to see how we can support our families. So in a nutshell, I think Wanda, if you're here, if there's anything that I missed, she was our note taker. That was the general sense of what we gathered during our group. It was a really lively group and I appreciated everybody's cooperation and participation with that.
Wonderful job, Kathy, of highlighting all of the key points. I appreciate that. And just, definitely the focus on the mental health aspect was number one importance there, and connecting families with the technology, finding creative ways, partnerships that have that funding in the community to support that technology aspect, and then doing maybe a little bit of teaching moving forward, hopefully with something like the tools from the Department of Education, being able to share those with some of the agencies so that they have those supportive tools to share with the parents for teaching the parents how to do some of that remote learning as well.
Awesome. Thank you. You're on mute, Bill.
You think after 10 months, I might know how to do this. I'm going to ask Nazreen to please report from the employment breakout.
Hi there. So it was a great group. It was a small group, but a lot of participation. We talked about, Representative Cutler shared about issues related to disabilities and employment and issues of transportation. There's a lot of work going on. So it was good to hear that there's 11 recommendations that his group has worked on, and we will be able to share that information with you, to the whole group as we get this information from Representative Cutler's office. The mass hire, Sheila Sullivan discussed Well, it's a very important issue: employment, unemployment, training, and a lot of virtual work is going on right now. They're doing a job fair. They have training for job seekers, and so it's a work in progress. And there's some issues related to technology because not everybody has the access to a laptop, or issues related to that. So there is a job fair that's going on soon, and we will share the information about the job fair to you all. They do 75% of pay for smaller agencies who hire people. And so it's important to know there's a bankers association who are training universal teller program. And so it's important to know that there's a lot of work going on, and it's work in progress, and there are barriers, but they are working towards it. And the connection between the agencies, was important. For example, Red Cross is doing a lot of work in terms of volunteers, and we would like to connect with the Red Cross agency. So we looked into that, and also a road to responsibility. So there's a lot of connection between employment, childcare, transportation, and road to responsibility has been working towards that. In the beginning, I think many of the agencies had to close, and many, had to find funding or to get back, to work. And I am not sure if I'm missing anything. Would anyone else like to jump in and give a little bit more about our employment issues? Anyone want to add anything if I missed anything? So it's work in progress. Employment is one of the most important issues of our times. Without employment, food on the table, children. And would you like to share, Chris?
Yeah, Nazreen, I just want to point out the success story that I think Janice from Co-op noted, how people with disabilities, and this happened at RTR as well, people with disabilities, when they were identified as essential workers for some of the jobs, they were the ones who showed up. And, so there have been some really good things that have happened along with the struggles we've faced.
Thank you, Chris. That was me that shared that, and it's true that our essential workers are very proud of the fact that they are identified as essential. They're reliable. We've got some great examples of people who have been in their jobs for more than a decade, and we're happy to share those. I know those individuals have gained such self-esteem by being productive during this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you. You're muted, Bill.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Jean. I'd like to ask Mike, would you report on food insecurity, please?
Absolutely. In terms of needs and gaps, we identified funding, assessment of needs, and that frequently people that are coming for food insecurity also, it's an indicator of a number of other need areas in their lives. Administrative barriers, transportation and delivery to disabled and or elderly or people that are in very rural areas. But one of the other issues we've noticed is that the supply is not meeting the demand in regards to being able to feed everybody that's looking to be fed. Also, just access to knowing where to go. I think one person just asked me about, is there a statewide list of food banks? Is there somewhere online? If there's a link that somebody knows of, please feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll look it up later if we don't get it. Also needs of families, for individuals and families that are coming outside of the food banks catchment areas is another one. There seems to be overflow. A lack of bulk items. and as well as social distancing protocols for people that are trying to do the food deliveries and get food to people that are in need. So those are our main needs and gaps. And what we discussed about, how to address this is that today is a good start. Today's conversation, getting people together that are all, in the same subset of field, having conversation, sharing resources. That's one of the first steps. Another one of our groups indicated that there should be some specific action steps developed around how we can better achieve delivery for food for people in need. Building coalitions and partnerships that can go with people that are in this meeting, as well as building coalitions with local grocery stores or other places that could help provide needed items. They also talked a lot about partnering with different grocery stores. One thing that I personally really liked was more encouragement and engagement and role modeling or leadership from within organizations. I think top down, seeing the higher people really get in there and walking the walk, I think would make a big difference as well. And I think the last thing, as we already said, was identifying resources, just knowing where to go, trying to generate resources. And so the one thing that I think our group closed on would be, a good idea would be to, maybe start a subcommittee, around, with the individuals involved, with the organizations that are doing this. In CBHI, they have what they call systems of care meetings, where all local agencies that are providing the services meeting monthly to discuss changes in delivery, changes in service specs, all that stuff. I think the same could be done and created for each one of our categories here, where all of you are meeting subsets at certain intervals, reviewing and discussing what are the needs and what are the changes in services.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else care to chime in from food insecurity? I've offered to report for the housing and homelessness session. Good group. Needless to say, there were many concerns and challenges there. Access to affordable housing, of course. Housing stock, someone has said, is basically non-existent. Rental assistance is needed desperately. And moving resources was certainly a challenge mentioned, and both short-term and beyond. Waivers are helpful. Disparities lead to relocation, some people having to move as far as Western Massachusetts or beyond. Undocumented families living in substandard housing is certainly an issue, and even more so with the pandemic. We heard from Janice Fitzgerald about older adults and how there's sometimes a 2 to 3 year wait to get proper housing. There has certainly been evidence of racial discrimination and not in my backyard, that dynamic that continues to plague us, and some domestic violence discrimination as well. Oftentimes, landlords do not want to include victims in their places for living, for fear there will be more of that abuse. And as far as solutions go, vacant properties, there are many vacant properties with potential. The stress was on partnering and collaborating for rehabilitation. That certainly needs to happen. It has happened, but it continues to be a need. Senator Brady mentioned places in Easton and Hanover, as well as downtown Brockton possibilities. I had asked about large-scale developers paying into funds for affordable housing, and while that's a good idea, it's often complicated, but certainly needs to be pursued. Also, the purchase of a hotel is in the offing in Brockton. And the trend, and this is a good trend, is from emergency sheltering of homeless people to a housing resource center, which April had mentioned. So I think by and large, the emphasis has been on partnering and collaborating, and the kind of thing that we're doing today. Others from that session who might want to add to what I've said. Moving right along, Leslie Dunn will report on the technology and telehealth session. Leslie.
Hi, great. Thanks, Bill. So we had a small group, but lots of discussion. We talked about the challenges that agencies and programs some had when the pandemic hit, and trying to create an infrastructure for remote, access, remote service delivery. And it sort of came out that, different agencies were at different places when this all hit. Some were in sort of a better shape and had a full IT department to help them. And others were sort of, struggling to buy the right equipment, to get all of the software, and also to get their staff skills up to the level to be able to deliver services in this way. For consumers, it continues to be a struggle for some populations, just as far as having equipment to access, services remotely, to having the skills to do it, to having internet access. I mean, there's so many different levels that we talked about that can be a barrier. And all of the programs are working, individually with their consumers to problem solve and figure out ways to, do some hybrid learning, to have consumers be able to come into the office, make appointments, and, for them to be able to access the technology there. I think we also discussed how, especially with the homeless population, getting them the telehealth medical services can be difficult because they typically don't have a phone, don't have a computer. And then, if there's a change in that and they've worked it out with Father Bills to do all of that on site with them, and then the doctor changes the time, it can just cause problems. We also talked about fear that some consumers just, are nervous about whether it's just the internet in general, or nervous about trying to learn something new. And a lot of the consumers are heavily dependent on maybe other family members to help them. And if they didn't have that person sitting with them to help them, then they wouldn't be able to access anything. Mike Murphy from Senator O'Connor's office was in our group, and we talked about the new legislative session, and he's hopeful and confident that there'll be continued discussion around telehealth and technology. Our group also had mentioned funding. At this point in the pandemic, and just sort of where we are, if someone doesn't have internet access or a phone, or a computer, and they're struggling to keep food on the table, they're not going to pursue the technology. They're going to take care of their basic needs first. So, there's challenges on so many different levels, in addition to, internet strength in certain areas, in the more rural areas of the state. They may have internet access, but it's choppy, they can get kicked off, and that just breeds frustration, and does not make for the virtual format to be, enjoyable at all. So does anybody else from my group have anything to add if I missed anything? Nope.
You covered
Great.
a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Leslie. And finally, reporting on the transportation session is our own inimitable Dennis Carmen, who's not going to sing to us, I trust, because it has a swollen head today after all the compliments. No jokes, no music. Just talk to us about transportation.
I will absolutely do that. And at the risk of offending anybody, we had the absolute best group on the planet, just so you know. And at the risk of incurring a few groans with a dad joke, our conversation about transportation really moved along. So, but it was wonderful. We had the benefit of State Senator Keenan with us. We also had Representative Machino's assistant, John Hamilton. They were invaluable in giving us some good advice. And we were fortunate to have Will Shane and a number of people who were from the steering committee of the transportation, the Taking People Places project in the greater Plymouth area. So there was a great conversation talking about needs for transportation even before the pandemic. Certain groups of people like veterans, elders, people with disabilities, people with mental health issues having trouble navigating transportation. If you want to go into Boston from South Shore, you've got a number of options. If you're in Brockton, you might have a number of options. If you're in Plymouth, you have the option of our friends at GATRA, who do a pretty nice loop system. But if you're trying to go east-west across southeastern Massachusetts, you're kind of out of luck. And so whether you're a veteran or an elder, the challenges of transportation are significant. What's really heartening is to hear the discussion that we had talk about the need for partnerships. Our friend representative from GATRA, Joanne, was saying, to get funds to be allocated for specific projects, you need partnerships, vibrant partnerships. And I think TPP sets a great example of threading together a number of nonprofits who have made the case and started to tell the stories about the needs in order to get some funding and to build on some funding. And typically is all going to be about shared costs, because no one organization can solve the problem. So State Senator Keenan was very clear about saying, come into our offices, meet with us individually, talk about the stories, tell the stories about these situations. And if you do that, there's more of a chance to get an earmark in the budget that could be starting small and maybe grown to a greater amount to help meet the needs. We have a great idea of, you start with TPP, which was based on a program in the greater Attleboro Taunton area. It's being more and more successful. We need to continue to grow it. So there were a lot of great themes that I think tie into all of these need areas of ways we can collaborate and work together. And so I want to thank the members of our group for the conversation, and really a quick thank you to everybody who's joined this morning, because this has been a wonderful, wonderful event. And other than Bill missing the bacon too, I miss having the bacon. It's really been a great morning. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Dennis. I'd like to thank all of you for your reports. And at this time, I'd like to thank our public servants, as well as our community partners and event organizers for your attendance and your active participation. Not to harp on what I said earlier, but I firmly believe that what we've attempted to do today is the foundation of our democracy, really. It's addressing issues of mutual interest and the interest of those we serve, listening to each other, as varied as our approaches might be, and reimagining and rebuilding our community in the wake of COVID-19. For all of those who grieve and have suffered the terrible effects of the pandemic, our hearts go out to you. We remain committed, all of us, to the hope and the healing that come of working together in the pursuit of values we all of us hold dear. Again, we hope next year we'll be meeting in person, maybe even shaking hands and embracing, celebrating the relationships we cherish and the progress we've made as a larger community. We'll be showing the video of our various organizations once again, and to end our time here today, that's how we'll do it. So I encourage you to be safe and healthy. Take good care of yourselves. You're doing marvelous work, as Dennis has said, and keep up that good work. There are many who depend on us. Again, thank you all for coming.
God bless and thank you.